Yeah, it's nice to meet you, Devin. You've finally made it in life when you're being interviewed by a guy sitting in a Corolla. So you've done well.
Well, you know what, man? When I was younger, I had a short list of aspirations, and so now I can check that one off.
Big
Mate,
ticks.
Yeah, I mean, big ticks.
mate, so whereabouts? So you're in your studio in Canada?
Yeah, yeah, I'm in Vancouver.
Easy.
Um, yeah, man, it's been a lot of work over the past couple of weeks, and I would like to be in this room more than I have been able to. But some friends of mine, a guy just went through some cancer things, so we were just trying to take care of him, and
Mhm.
then the leaves all fall, and then you're finding that your creative life is juxtaposed by yard work, and I guess it keeps you humble, but until that's done, I haven't been in here nearly enough, and I want to be, man, because I got so many ideas, but one step at a time.
You're
Shoot.
the first thing I want to ask is, and just a bit of background on me to give this a bit of context. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I quit drinking at the start of 2018 and I'm over 5 years sober. You've had a much longer stretch than that. But one thing I've noticed is that the first year that people get sober is a pretty profound lifestyle adjustment. What were the biggest challenges for you? And more importantly, how did you notice people's perception of you change, given that had a reputation in the strapping years for being that kind of wild man?
Well, I was always a lightweight. I mean, reputations are more romantic than reality. I was never a very proficient partier. I think the biggest thing is the social aspect. You predicate your relationship on certain activities with people, and in absence of that, all of a sudden you find yourself in this transition period where you've got no one around you, and that took a little bit of adjustment. But I also think that um, you know, if your focus is in the right place, I think the nature of addiction, in my opinion, and obviously I'm not an expert, is filling a void. And if if you're able to recognize, like I believe to a certain extent I've been able to, where that void was, then the need for escaping it seems a lot less and a lot more manageable, right? But that process just, I think it involves consciously cutting certain people out of your life, and that's difficult, right? If they're people that you care about too, it's not an easy thing anywhere along the line. But again, man, I think what you're doing is admirable, because I do know that the people closest to me certainly benefited from when I went through that, right?
Awesome, man. Thank you very much.
Grapefruit juice, by the way.
Well, yeah, Tom definitely went straight in with the heavy questions for Heavy Devi.
I'll take it, man.
Um, Open book stuff, lovely.
Yeah.
Mine kind of blends the fantastical and the world we live in right now. Uh, you're known for loving a good bit of futurism, lots of sci-fi themes running through your music. What are your thoughts on AI now that the robots are finally taking over?
I think it's a tool. I think it's a sophisticated algorithm more so than a messiah. I think I think that as a tool, there's a lot of use that I have for it that I think is really creatively interesting. I
Hmm.
think people tend to want to find the boogeyman and then focus all their inability to control anything else in their life on that as being the primary thing that we need to fear. But I think, like anything else, fearing something that's inevitable is it's a lot of effort, and
Hmm.
it is inevitable. So I use it. I'm like, oh, this works great for me. I have a lot of applications in which I find the AI is really cool. Like being able to visualize a concept visually, artistically, like through Midjourney or what have you, and being able to
Hmm.
then say, "Oh yeah, okay, that's really cool. I love being able to see it in a sort of final form immediately, and let's refine it, and then from there, for example, like uh, I can take it to my friend who builds puppets or builds uh, sculptures and say, well, here's a
Hmm.
starting. Doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be exactly that, but for me, that saves a shitload of time, man. Like it's just, and it's fun too. And I think on a musical level, uh, there's a certain amount of AI and the algorithms that go into it that I find really inspiring. Like I put things on with keywords and then take that and orchestrate it or jam with it.
Hmm.
Uh, and sometimes it yields nothing, but other times it's inspiring and it allows me to go down another avenue. I think I think it's one should be wary of just fearing something that has as much potential as it does. But who knows, man? Maybe time will tell. Maybe
Yeah. So it sounds like, sorry, I was just going to say, it sounds like you'd much rather be riding the wave on top of it than being crushed beneath it and
well,
dumped into the undertow.
I don't have a preference as much as just creatively it's interesting to me. So if that means that I'm riding it, then that's a peripheral effect. You know, I I think what works best for me is to kind of, and specifically now more than ever, is to separate myself from a lot of the social media stuff, just because, well, I mean, for the obvious reasons. But I
Hmm.
also feel that things become, in vogue to fear, or in vogue to hate, or to love, or to rage against, and it's so fluid, right? Like,
Hmm.
what people were murderously upset about last week has been replaced by something else this week, and honestly, man,
Fickle bunch.
I got aging parents and kids and a ton of ideas in my head, and it's like requires so much effort to be
Hmm.
constantly outraged by shit that I kind of, and it's not to say that things aren't outrageous because they clearly
Hmm.
are, but I also find that if I distance myself from some of these things, they don't have the same stranglehold on
Yeah.
my work,
Yeah.
let
Freeze you
alone
up.
my person, right? And I
Yeah.
often feel like if there's something I really need to deal with, like if there is like an impending threat that is going to wipe out everything that me and my family and my friends and everybody like are invested in, I got so many people around me that are going to tell me. You know what I mean?
They'll
Everybody I know
let you know.
is just online all the time. So it's like chances of me not getting a heads up is like zero. So I figure that they can do that work and I'll just keep writing.
Yeah. Maybe that way you can stay locked in your bunker.
Well, the romantic, again, the romantic notion is to stay locked up in a studio and just create endlessly. But the reality of it is, man, it's like I'm in here an hour a day, and the rest of it is taking care of life, right? I'm sure it's the
Yeah.
same with you, man. Like, if we
Yeah.
were,
Life gets in the way.
oh, dude, if we were islands unto ourselves, it would just be like, yeah, man, this is all I would do. But I got, like I got a family, and there's a business, and there's so much shit that all day.
Hmm.
This morning I was painting, and then mowing the lawn, and then my buddy had to go pick him up from the hospital, and then my kid's birthday yesterday. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm
Happy
itching to
birthday.
be in here, and yeah, I'm itching to be here creating. But I sat down here last night to do some work and fell asleep in the chair. So
Sleep at the wheel.
fuck yeah.
Devin, you famously have a guitar tone that could smash a planet in half. What are some guitar tropes that you've noticed in modern music?
That I like or that I dislike.
You know what? Either.
Well, it's not that I dislike any of the modern guitar tropes. They just may not be right for me, right? Like, and then usually it's the mid range. That's the difference for me. Like, I came up 80s, 90s, what have you, and a lot of what constituted a good guitar sound was in the beginning was the JCM 800 with the tube screamer. set as a clean boost.
Classic.
And then that moved to like a dual rectifier with a tube screamer as a clean boost to tighten up the low end. And then the 5150, but that had like a different mid-range thing that was cool for me for a while, but ultimately mixed in oddly with the orchestration. So I stuck with the Mesa thing. And now it seems like a lot of the younger players have a real sort of clangy sound, even though it's metallic. There's this kind of like gang, 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 gang thing going on, and like not a real smooth upper mid range. And again, it's not that it's bad. It works great for if you're writing riffs that depends on that kind of clangy sound, and that's that's what you need. But that's not what I write. So whenever someone says, "Dude, I got this new amp. It's what all the cool kids are using," I play it. It's like gang. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, I want it to scrunch. I want it to be like crunchy, but like with a soft attack. You know what I mean? And like, I love that.
Which one turns the gang down?
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it, right? And it's like, but if you've got like hyper gated, no low end, tons of like whatever it is, like 1K and then and then like that sort of elastic band sounding high end. Again, if you're playing those really kind of notey riffs, that sort of janty thing, even, then it works.
On the clarity.
Yeah, but that's not what I do, right? So it's like every time I play it, I'm just like, fuck. So, yeah, man.
Well, I'll bounce off that one with one of my other questions. As a self-proclaimed gear whore, what's a bit of equipment that you have picked up recently that has kind of become indispensable to you? Especially, what are you bringing on tour with you when you come to Australia?
In Australia, I'm still using the Axe just because I have it as my main studio piece of gear, and even if I'm not using it for modeling, like I'll use it just for cab IRs, for example, and then run. KSR just sent me this little amplifier called the Orion that is like a lunchbox. It's fucking great. Plus, it's got a load balanced output, so you can run that into your Axe effects and just use an IR and all the effects in the Axe effects, and then have that flavor in there.
Create a little hybrid between the two.
Yeah, I love that. I think for Australia, just for the sake of touring being what it is right now and shipping being what it is right now, it makes much more sense for me just to fly with Axe effects as opposed to trying to put together a 16 space shock mounted rack for 4 shows, right? In terms of other gear, there's been a lot of shit that I've been introduced to recently that I thought was great. SSL makes this little unit that basically you put an instance of the plugin on every channel, and then it's right here, and then this unit just becomes it's like a channel strip. So it's like whatever your track is that you're on, you basically got an SSL strip, and it's like so efficient for making your mixes. Like if you're using it in a tactile way as opposed to visually, it's the progress I've made mix wise as a result of just that piece of gear has been great. And they're like $600, right? They're not.
Yeah, cool. So just kind of makes it a lot more sort of fluid, tactile, as opposed to keeping your eyes stuck on the fucking gauges and monitors and just feel it out a bit more.
Plus, I think I get into these habits of visually referencing my work and then saying, oh, that's clearly too much high end, not because it's too much high end, but because it looks like it's too much high end, right? Like I wouldn't add that much typically or whatever. However, with something that's tactile, if I'm just listening and I crank it up, I'm often shocked at how much or how little of that frequency ends up sounding right to me when I'm not just referencing it with my eyes, right? Another thing I got that was really cool is this tiny little Yamaha keyboard. It's called the CP something. It's like $400, but it's got really cool built-in sounds. Like I have it right here for my MIDI, and it's like it's just this tiny little thing, but it's got a microphone in it or a speaker, so I can actually, not only is it my MIDI controller, but a lot of times when I'm playing, because I'm not theoretically knowledgeable, like I don't know what notes I'm playing, and I don't have perfect pitch. So I've written all the notes on it. So if I'm like, wonder what note that is, I can hit it and hear it and then be like, oh, it's an F or an F sharp and I was shocked at how much that helped. I think I went in.
So you can sort of like almost like be doing like a voice memo while you're jamming along, and it'll help you pick the notes that you're
Yeah.
vocalizing.
Well,
Yeah, wow.
or even if you're with somebody and they're like, "What note are you playing?" Because if somebody
Hmm.
asks me that, I have to go C, D, E, F.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know how to
kind of
do it,
true.
right? But
I know there's a D there.
if I have a keyboard right here, I can be, what note is that? It's a C. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sweet.
And then also, I guess the last thing that I would say is a really cool piece of gear is I got a tuner made by Sonic Research. It's a pedal, like just a simple
Hmm.
pedal. But most tuners, a lot of tuners are really graphically beautiful, but maybe
Hmm.
they're not super accurate, or maybe they're not as fast as I like. But this little
Hmm.
Sonic Research thing, when I'm playing, everything always goes through it like as a separate
Yeah, yep.
output. So I'll plug into my distribution strip, and that goes to my Axfex or the KSR or whatever, the Helix. But at all times, I can see what note I'm playing. So
Yeah.
again, if I'm playing, I'm like, oh, that's an F. Oh, that's a G. Oh, I'm out of tune. You know what I mean? If it's right in
Yeah.
my line of sight, it makes, like, the whole thing that I'm trying to achieve is just how ergonomic and how minimal can you make your setup so
Hmm.
that you only have what you need, and you can identify where the problems are. And a lot of it for me is like finding pitches, or
Hmm.
I don't have perfect pitch, but man, when I'm my sensitivity to things being out of tune and phase is fucking
Yeah,
obscene. So
yeah.
it's like I gotta, these things are really super helpful to me, man.
Yeah, awesome. I'll have to check a few of those out. I think I could use a
Yeah.
few of those myself.
That little SSL thing, man. You can SoftTube also makes one that's really cool that you can use with third-party plugins as opposed to just the SSL one. But because I was, I cut my teeth, so to speak, on SSL
Hmm.
desks, it's so familiar that I'm like, oh fuck, this is great.
Yeah, yeah. Just
Yeah.
intuitive for you.
Hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, then when this is not people hate it when I do this because it makes them feel old. This is not it's not the intention, but I
Trust me,
was
that won't make me feel old. I know I'm old.
I was 12 years old when you released an album called City, and I heard the track Underneath the Waves, and it blew just them and that, and like Pantera, just and Fear Factory all around the same time. Just
I
my
remember.
entire outlook on music changed.
I
Um,
remember.
when people bring up, firstly, I've always respected the fact that you haven't you yeah, when people bring up is strapping coming back, you're like, no, that's a part of my life that's not done anymore, and you've, for the sake of your own mental health, you haven't elected to go back to that for monetary reasons or whatever. So firstly,
Sure. Yeah.
good.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah,
Don't take this the wrong way, but I hope strapping never comes back together. uh
yeah. Me too.
for your
Wow.
sake. But you've referred to the negative emotions of that time in your life, around the time of strapping. My question is, to what extent did that also affect the solo material that you were releasing around that time? Does that period, like Ocean Machine and stuff, have a similar feeling to it in your eyes?
No, good question though. I mean, and just to be clear, I'm so proud of strapping, like everything, all of it. I love it. It's not an issue of that. And I love the guys too. I think they're all amazing. We had such great times, and it was a pivotal point in my life. Um, but I guess it goes to to two things. One is the process that I employ to create things now, as it was then, was just following what seemed to be creatively like compelling to the most articulate end that I could. And the frame of mind that I was in when I was 23 or 24, as opposed to in my 50s, resonated with that perfectly. That's exactly where I was. So when people, what sometimes I find curious is when bands that have gone a certain way, they're like, oh, we don't do that anymore, or we don't play that anymore. But then when they talk about the old material, it's like they're embarrassed of it, or like they, you know. But I put my entire life into that when it was my life. Like, and then when it wasn't, I went to something else. And and the difference between the early solo material and strapping is strapping was something that sideswiped me. I didn't expect to do it. So I was always writing music like Ocean Machine or Infinity. That was kind of what I was doing prior to moving on and working with Steve. But then when I went through the experience with Steve, I was so young and the industry was just so fucked up that I got angry, right? And then I just remember thinking, you know, I got signed to Relativity and they dropped me. I got signed to Roadrunner and they dropped me. And then
Rude.
I went and joined an English band, and you know they were like and violence was their trip. And then I was just like, what the fuck, man? And then I came back and I just wrote, not because I was, you know, into death metal. I was just like, you know, I was listening to a lot of Morbid Angel or Carcass or whatever, and I thought,
That'll do it to you.
well, and I also thought, oh, I can do this. Fuck yeah, I can do this. I get it. It makes sense to me. Okay, so I'll write a couple songs like this, and that's what got signed. So
Yeah.
I had all this other stuff that I was trying to get signed for years, and they just kept dropping me, kept dropping me, kept dropping me. So when finally I got all pissy pants and made a couple of heavy songs. I think it was Home Nucleonics and Skin Me were the first two. Then Century Media was like, "Oh, we'll sign you," and I was like, "Okay, well, better than nothing." And so I put out the first album, which was just a collection of demos. And then it just things kept getting more and more. That's when I decided that drugs were the way to go. And then, you know, you found like all sorts of things in your life that started doubling down on that like darkness at the time. And so when it came time to put out the second record, because Heavy is a really heavy thing, didn't sell anything. Like really, no one gave a shit about that record. Um, and maybe rightfully so in some way. But when it came to the second one, I still couldn't get it signed. Sony in Japan said, if you start your own label, we'll license Ocean Machine. So while I was working on Ocean Machine, I moved to LA just to try and get my foot in the door a little bit more. And I was sleeping on my buddy's couch and just listening to Old Lady Drivers and Morbid Angel and a bunch of bands. What was the band I used to listen to from New Zealand? It was She Had as well at the time.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, they had an album called Killjoy I was listening to a lot at the time. And but you know, it was like a Young Gods. There was a bunch of things, Fetus, that were like really important to me. And I was like, okay, now I know how to make something brutal. I'm gonna make something super fucked up. And then I made City and wrote it entirely in my bedroom, and then met Gene at a bar, and we were both shit faced, and I asked him to play on it, and he forgot that he said yes, and then I held him to it, and then we recorded it, and then before I knew it, I was all of a sudden I was like, I guess I'm in a metal band. I guess that's what I do. I guess I make extreme metal, and then like anything, it's like I started recognizing the ways in which it works and the ways in which it doesn't work, and then I started getting better at it. And then when I started getting really good at it, all of a sudden I realized I was like, fuck, I don't want to do this, man. This is what? Just because I'm good at it doesn't necessarily mean this is the right thing for my future. And at the time, the amount of people that were going, well, that's crazy because it's becoming successful. And my whole thing with that is, man, if you become really successful at something that you're not 100% behind, which I wasn't, then God help you, man. You know what I mean? It's like that's how you end up really making a mess of your life, because you try to rationalize these things that you're doing and you're getting paid for it, and then your family's being supported by it. Before you know it, you're like
yeah, you're all caught up in it.
55 years old with a mullet, right?
Skullet. And you
Yeah,
got
right.
that thing.
Yeah, I did, man.
Yeah, so that makes you think that, yeah, over the course of your career and the different projects that you've been in, obviously you have played a lot of wildly different stuff. Is there any sort of genres or styles that you haven't particularly played around with yet that you think really could use with a bit of that heavy slant on top of them? what's a direction you want to go into that you haven't gone into before?
Well, I mean, another good question, but I also would say that I don't think about it in that sense. I just do what seems interesting to me. And if
Mhm.
that leads me to things that I haven't done, that makes it even more interesting because there's a degree of novelty to it. But no, I really try to follow my creative inclinations in line with my life. So if my life is chaos, the things that appeal to me are chaotic things, right? If
Mhm.
my life requires balance, the things that appeal to me make me feel more balanced when I'm working on them. If I'm angry, I feel like that's what's going to come out, you know, if I'm whatever it is. And so the thing that's important to me more than anything else is being able to clear space in my personal life to be able to really get a grasp on where I'm at,
Mhm.
you know, and it's retroactively I can claim it as being intentional, like, oh yeah, I meant to do that, and you know, we've always wanted to try
Mental.
this. Dude, never, dude. I'm just like,
Yeah, yeah.
I just fuck around until something doesn't irritate me anymore, and then I'm like, well, I guess that's where I'm at. And the thing that holds those kinds of sentiments together at that point then is a degree of authenticity, and that's really the only caveat at this point.
Yeah.
So to not have been super successful at anything has been a blessing in a lot of ways because now there's nobody, like, you know, every now and then someone will whinge about strapping
Mhm.
or want, you know, something like I did with any of the other records even. But it's not irritating enough to be really irritating. It's just a thing where I'm like, I relate, I get it, thank you very much, but that's not where I'm at.
Yeah,
Onward.
you're not bound to it. You're not limited by it.
It's awesome. I'm gonna have
Awesome.
to go in a minute or two here.
Yeah, yeah, all good, guys. We're about to get booted off Zoom, so we might say our goodbyes now. Devin, thank you so much for your time, man. This has been awesome.
So welcome.
I'm
So
sure
welcome.
Rashid is going to agree that your music in all of its various forms has been an enormous influence on my life. So thank you, just from the
You're
bottom
so
of my.
welcome, and it's an absolute pleasure, man. It's an absolute pleasure. I hope to be able to continue, and I hope that the idea that I've had for this next phase of kind of removing myself from everything and everybody yields something that's really cool. And so,
Yeah, and
fingers
we'll be here
crossed.
for you when you're ready, man.
I really appreciate that. That's the nicest thing you could say. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Okay.
No worries,
Take care,
man.
Dev.
See you
Bye, bye,
guys.
guys.